What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Critter format video. And in this video, I'm going to be covering a deck that I've heard a lot of people asking about in some of my comment sections, which is Muka Muka Turbo. Now, the reason why people have asked about this on things like my tier list video and in my tournament report videos is because I haven't actually done a video on the deck itself. I've sort of more treated the strategy as an engine in other decks like Fusion or Harpies or anything that might have a fair amount of bricks, as Muka Muka can really shine in decks like that. But it is a respectable strategy on its own, and going into the next Critter format tournament, it is something to keep an eye out for and something that you might want to play. So I figured that I would cover it on the channel before that tournament starts, just to show off what the deck can do on its own. Before diving into the deck breakdown, if you like this sort of content featuring old Yu-Gi-Oh formats like this, then please be sure to subscribe to the channel. We are just over 275 subscribers last I checked, which is really awesome. Really excited to see. I'd really like to reach 300 by the end of the year. So if you enjoy my stuff and want to keep updated on what I'm doing next, then please be sure to subscribe. Also, if you like the video, as always, please leave a like down below. Also, one last thing of note before diving into the deck breakdown. Given all the positive feedback on the face cam from my last video, I've decided to keep the face cam going forward. If there's a lot of negative feedback surrounding it in the future, then I can take it away, but it seems that everyone enjoys it, so I'll keep it around for the foreseeable future. Now that all that's out of the way, let's dive into the deck breakdown. So Muka Muka Turbo is a deck that's really based around Muka Muka, which is a pretty weak monster on its own, just 600 attack, 300 defense, but it gains 300 attack and defense for every card in your hand. And in a control format like Critter, you can amass quite a big hand over the course of the game. So this card can be a powerhouse. It's also good in a variety of decks in this format. Like, you'll see a lot of mass control decks playing Muka Mukas, maybe not at 3 copies, but at least 1. I think more and more people have started to appreciate it more and more as the format has developed further. So our deck is basically trying to play it like a big beater that is very hard for an opponent to out, and using ways to bring it out, like off of Sandgan and Witch to grab it to hand, and things like Last Will to grab it straight from deck. For instance, if you walk one Muka Muka straight into a trap hole, you can Last Will bring out another, still have a very powerful beater that's very easy to access. We also have monsters to buff up Muka Muka's attack, like Thunder Dragon, just adding more cards to hand. And also, Thunder Dragon does thin your deck down a bit. It does pair well with something like Change of Heart, which you can use to take an opponent's monster, tribute over it, get a monster on field, and remove one of theirs. So, Thunder Dragon has a lot of cool applications in this deck. And also, Thunder Dragon does enable you to play this as a fusion deck if you so wish. As this deck is basically the one that I showed off in my fusion video, just without the polymerization. Instead of the polymerization, we just have another copy of Last Will, as Last Will can bring out Muka Mukas more. But the Thunder Dragons make this deck a natural fit for Fusion if you want to take it in a slightly more jank direction. For the other monsters, we've got 3 Law Djinns to act as even more beaters. This is a very good card in the format, just in general. We've got 2 Giant Soldier of Stone to get a bit more defensive. You can also bring this out off of Last Will if you want to wall up after an opponent's trap hole, potentially. Giant Soldier also pairs well with the Robin Goblin that we have in the deck, which I'll get to later. But if you set Giant Soldier, set Robin Goblin, your opponent could lose a card very quickly. We also have 2 Mass Sorcerers to get in some draws there. This is another great fetch off of Last Will, and can just enable you to add more cards to hand for Muka Muka. And lastly, we have 1 Cannon Soldier, great at ending the game, can also combo very, very well with Last Will and Change of Heart. For the spells, we of course have the Power 5 limited spells, Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, and Raigeki. All insanely strong in this deck and pretty much every other deck in the format as well. We have 3 Fissure to act as even more removal in the deck. We have 2 Heavy Storm to clear away our opponent's back row, clear the way for Muka Mukas to get in and deal some major damage. We have the 2 Last Will that I mentioned before, and we've got 2 Swords Revealing Light, which can allow you to stall for a bit, potentially replenish your hand to boost up a Muka Muka. For the trap cards, we have 1 Mirror Force, insanely strong card in this format if you're able to pull it off. We have 1 Robin Goblin. This is mainly to deal with Exodia, as you want to have some way in the main deck to discard cards in case your opponent is on an Exodia strategy. But it's also good in a deck like this where you'll likely have a monster, Muka Muka, that can get over pretty much anything else your opponent has on field. So if you can take advantage of it in that way, then this can be extremely good, as the card is individually powerful on its own, just ripping cards from your opponent's hand. We also have 3 Solemn Judgment just to stop any of our opponent's big pushes and plays. This deck can suffer a bit if your opponent has a ton of removal, as it's not playing too many monsters, so it's good to have the Solemns just in case. It also doesn't have too many defensive options. It does have the Giant Soldiers of Stone, and Muka Muka can be used defensively if you need it, but besides that, it doesn't really have the most defensive options, so Solemn Judgment can be very good at stopping your opponent's big offensive pushes as well. We also have 3 Waboku to also, protect us even more. Protect our monsters and protect our life points. For the side deck, we have 3 Jiraigumo to get even more aggressive. We have 2 Magician of Faith just because it's a very good card, and in a slower matchup, this can be good to recycle some spells. We have 1 Man in your bug if we need more monster removal, 1 Giant Soldier of Stone if we need to get more defensive. We have 2 Card Destruction if we have the read that our opponent's going to be on Exodia game 2 or 3. This can be good to bring in. We have 3 7 Tools of the Bandit if our opponent's on a bit more of a control strategy. We can bring these in to stop their Solemn Judgments. We have 3 Trap Hole in case they're on a bit more of a beatdown strategy. This could be great to bring in, get rid of opposing Jiraigumos and the like. For the extra deck, you should reasonably have a full extra deck. I just have the 3 Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon in here because I quickly adapted this from the Fusion deck that I mentioned earlier. So that was what that deck was running. That's what this deck's running. You should just have a full 15 just to play mind games with the opponent, but it realistically won't matter in the games themselves. But now that we're done with the deck breakdown, let's dive into the games and see if the Muka Mukas can actually support a deck on their own rather than just being an engine in a deck. Okay, we've got a duel against Aratos, who is one of the best duelists in the format. They won the last tournament, so always exciting to have them on, always sure to be a great game. So we are on the Muka Muka Turbo strategy, unclear what they're on, but we do win the rock, paper, scissors, so we are able to go first here, which is very good for us. This hand, however, is not very good for us. We've got Thunder Dragon, so we can get 2 Thunder Dragons from deck, but we don't have any monsters to really do anything with. We do have Change of Heart and Reborn, which are very nice, but I don't know, this is kind of an iffy hand. So I think what we're going to do here is we're actually just going to set the Robin Goblin, pass to them. If they bring out a Mass Sorcerer and attack in, then that of course is very bad. Same with if they bring out a White Magical Hat and attack in, similarly bad. But it's not the worst thing in the world, and next turn we can majorly punish them with like a Fisher. If we draw a monster, we can bring it out, attack in. We can also Change of Heart one of their monsters and try and attack in with that, flip up the Robin Goblin, discard a card, and then at the end of the turn, tribute it off for a Thunder Dragon or the like. So we've got options here, so I do like this play to get a bit more aggressive on the next turn. They're going to Pot of Greed, and that's fine by us. They're going to draw 2, and they're just going to bring out a Sangan and attack in. So this is one of the better cases. I mean, yes, if we don't draw a monster next turn, we will have to Change of Heart the Sangan, tribute over for the Thunder Dragon if we want to make that play, which isn't the best, but we might have to do it. We don't draw a monster here, and so I think we are just going to do it. We're going to Change of Heart the Sangan, attack in, flip up the Robin Goblin, and that will connect, so we will be able to discard a card from their hand, which is very nice. Unfortunately, we will be forced to tribute over that Sangan with the Thunder Dragon, so they will get a search. I mean, I guess we're not forced to. We could have given it back, but I feel like it's better this way. Just remove a monster from their field, get 1 more recruiter out of their deck. So I'm okay with this. Our Thunder Dragon is a bit vulnerable, which is unfortunate, but it's not the worst thing in the world. They're just going to set another, pass back to us. Last Will's pretty good. We could tribute over our Thunder Dragon and Last Will out a monster. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to flip up the Thunder Dragon. If they've got Trap Hole or Mirror Force and want to use it here, then we can Last Will afterwards to get a monster out. We're actually going to Reborn, just in case it's a monster we can get over, and we can get in for some damage. So It may be a bit greedy to do this, but I like doing it. I think it's pretty good. We're in a pretty good position. They've got a giant soldier, so unfortunately, we won't be able to get through, but it is what it is. They're going to pass back to us, not doing anything here. We draw a solemn, which is perfectly fine. We're just going to fisher away their giant soldier. Try and attack in with everything here. We could have potentially activated Lost Will if we were worried about Mirror Force. We could bring out a monster in the battle phase. If they Mirror Force, discard a card for sure. But I don't really think we're too scared about that, because if they do have Mirror Force, which turns out they do, we can now Last Will main phase 2, bring out a Recruiter and defense, and prepare for next turn. So we're just going to do that and pass back to them. We could have set the Solemn potentially, because we do have the Woboku set here. But I don't think the Solemn's really necessary, and we don't want to play into a heavy. If their second set is a heavy, then that would be really bad for us. So I think we just want to leave the Robin Goblin Woboku on field for now. There's nothing we're too worried about them doing here. So we're still in a very good position. They're just going to set 2 pass back to us. We draw swords, so we could get super aggressive here, activating swords just to see what they've got and see if we can attack into it. But I don't think we need to. We're just going to pass back to them. We could have summoned out the Thunder Dragon on top of the Witch to get a search off and press the aggressive, but I don't think we needed to do that. I think we can bide our time a little bit. The Muka Muka turbo strategy in general can bide its time a bit more than a lot of other decks can, as it's sort of building up to drawing the Mukas and getting a huge monster on field. So I think that this is fine. And they're just going to set another pass back to us. We draw a giant soldier, so we don't need to commit it to board. We'll pass back to them. We draw a fisher, which is very nice. We could potentially swords now, see what they're working with, and then fisher away something if we need it. Bring out a giant soldier, attack in. It's a bit greedy, but we might want to do it. Looks like we're not going to do it, though. And we're just going to pass back to them. They're going to pass back to us. And we draw Muka, which is a really good draw. We're going to summon that out. They don't have Trap Hole, so that's very nice for us. We are just going to attack one of their sets. We could have switched Witch to attack, to potentially attack the other, but that kind of gets punished by Mass Sorcerer if they've got it, so I didn't really feel the need to do that. And we attack into a Recruiter, and they're going to reveal that they are on Exodia, which is very worrying for us because, we've given that a lot of time to draw into potentially more pieces. And if that other set is a Recruiter, then we might be in a tough spot. We do have the Robin Goblin up, though, so that can hopefully help us out a bit here. If we do manage to get an attack and discard one of their pieces, I think we will have this game on wrap. But now that we know that they're on Exodia, we're going to set the Solemn and pass back to them. This will prevent them from making any super major pushes and enable us to hopefully keep the offensive. They're going to draw one, set another, pass back to us. We draw Mass Sorcerer, which is pretty decent. We're just going to activate Swords, though, and see what they've got, see if we can maneuver our Fisher in a way that we can get in for damage. Unfortunately, given that they've got a Mask of Darkness and an Aqua Mator, it doesn't look like we can, because if we activate the Fisher, that will destroy their Mask of Darkness and not their Aqua Mator, and at that point, our Muka Muka will drop down to 1800, so not quite the best. But they will be able to get back Mirror Force there, which is extremely unfortunate. Yeah, this is just a very rough turn of events for us. We can clear their board, just attacking into the Aqua Mator with the Muka, attacking into the Mask of Darkness with the Witch. So we're not too torn up about this. If they Mirror Force next turn, we do have the Solemn for that. But we are in a bit of a worrying situation, as we kind of do have to commit the Solemn to the Mirror Force. They're going to Reborn here, and we could actually commit the Solemn to the Reborn if we so wish, just because them getting back a Recruiter is so dangerous. I think we will just save it, because we just need to hope that they don't have enough pieces in hand already to assemble Exodia yet. And we've just got to save the Solemn for that Mirror Force push. They're going to get back the Sangan, set one, set another, pass back to us. And I think we should be in a good spot if that other set monster isn't a Recruiter, or if they don't have a bunch of pieces already in hand. We're going to bring in the Mass Sorcerer, and we're just going to try and get in here. We'll attack into the Sangan with the Witch. Sangan will die, they'll get a piece to hand. We'll attack into the set with a Muka. It is unfortunately another Recruiter. We've just got to pray at this point that they don't have 4 pieces of Exodia already in hand. They're going to add a last one, and unfortunately, that will be all 5 pieces in hand, so that will be the end of the game. They also had a Woboku set as well, so even if we had Solemn the Mirror Force, they would have been able to Woboku, so this wouldn't have been the best for us. We still would have had a bit of an uphill battle, and they did have 2 counter traps as well. So, kind of tough. Maybe if we had gone aggressive earlier in the game, we could have avoided this situation. But we had no way of knowing that they were on Exodia at that point. So, I think that we played it perfectly fine. It's just kind of unfortunate that it turned out this way. But that's going to be game 1 there. And we'll go into game 2. And siding for game 2 is kind of interesting because they're likely going to side out of Exodia, right? So, do we keep Muka Muka Turbo the same? Because I think that it does have a pretty decent matchup against Exodia post-siding. Or do I side in a bit more Exodia hate just in case? I actually keep the main deck the same because I figure if they're on the sort of standard Exodia side deck from the previous tournament and the tournament before that, then I think we actually have a decent matchup against them. Mukas can get over things like Lodgins and 7-colored fishes, which Exodia often sides into, that sort of more aggressive strategy. So I feel fine with the deck as is. Maybe this is a mistake, but I am personally willing to go with this. So we're going to go into game 2 and see if this does a little bit better here. Game 2, we will be able to go first again, as you know, we did lose that last game. And this opener isn't the best. We do have Lodgin, which is nice, but I don't know. Do we even want to commit it yet? We could, I guess, but I don't really think we need to. We're just going to set the heavy and pass. If they get a Mass Sorcerer, we get kind of punished by this. But if they commit some back row, we can use the heavy next turn. And I think that's reasonable. We can clear the way for our Lodgin, get in with the Lodgin, and maybe set like a Woboku or Mirror Force the turn after. Now, this does kind of highlight one of the major flaws of this deck, and you kind of did see this in game 1 as well, in that we are playing a kind of low monster count. So every monster that you have, you kind of have to make last, and that could force you into some suboptimal plays. I think maybe we could have played this first turn better, but we'll just have to wait and see. They do have the Masked Sorcerer here, so they will be able to get in and attack. Draw a card, kind of unfortunate for us, and they're just going to set one pass back to us. Kind of unfortunate there. We are going to heavy, and it is a Woboku. We're going to set a Lodgin, set a Mirror Force, pass back to them. If they commit a monster to board that can get over Lodgin, we've got the Mirror Force. If they don't, they can't actually get over the Lodgin. We dodge around Trap Hole, so I think that's pretty good. But they have got swords, so they will be able to summon out the Witch from hand and know that they'll be able to get over this Lodgin. We could just let this go, but I think we do want to protect our Lodgin, as we really don't have many monsters, and we don't want to let them draw off a Mass Sorcerer, so we are going to activate the Mirror Force, and that will destroy their monsters. They will get a Lodgin off of the Witch, kind of unfortunate, but we do have Wobokus for those, so not the worst. And we draw Raigeki, so that's good removal at least. They're going to draw a card, set one, pass back to us. That's perfectly fine. We're just going to pass back to them. We could have maybe set another spell or trap, because they're not likely to heavy while Swords is up, but I don't really think we need to. And if they've got heavy for after their Sword expires, then we kind of play into that by doing that. But they're just going to set one, pass back to us. We're just going to pass back to them and see what they do. They are going to activate heavy, so I'm very glad we didn't commit more back row to board. We're just going to activate Woboku in response, so our Lodgin is protected for this turn. They're going to flip up the Faith, grab back a Sword of Revealing Light. Kind of unfortunate. We are one heavy down, and they do know this, so it makes sense for them to do this. We don't really have a way to deal with it. And they're actually not going to fire the swords right now. That's very interesting. That means that they likely have some way to protect the Magician of Faith, and it's very likely that that way is a Mirror Force. So we could just potentially not play into it and not attack into the Magician of Faith. I think we should, though. I think we should just get them to use it up. We can always set the Muka afterwards, and even set a Woboku after that. We've got 5 cards in hand if we do that, and that will protect our Muka Muka from their Lodgin. So I think we should just go for it. And what we'll do is actually just set a Waboku pass back to them. We're not going to go for it. I think this is a major mistake. Now, there was reasoning to do this, but I will be honest here. The main reason I didn't do this was because I just didn't notice that they didn't activate swords. I wasn't really paying as much attention as I should have been. And if I noticed that they hadn't activated swords, I probably would have attacked into the Magician of Faith. Whether that would have changed things too drastically is unclear. I really don't think it would have that much, but it still would have been, I think, a much better play instead of what we did here. But let's see what they do in response. They're going to bring out that Lodgin that they have, and we know that they have because they searched it. And they're going to attack into our Lodgin. We do have the Waboku for that, so we will be able to clear their Lodgin that way. They're going to switch the Magician of Faith to defense, pass back to us. We drop Thunder Dragon. That is really nice. We'll be able to add 2 Thunder Dragons to hand. And we're just going to attack into the Magician of Faith. Might as well. Main phase 2, we're just going to set the Waboku again, and we are at 7 cards, although we don't realize it, so we should just discard a card. Honestly, we should probably set the Solemn instead of discarding. If they've got heavy, they've got heavy. We can chain Waboku to it. We're not too torn up about losing the Solemn, but instead we realized too late, and so we are just going to discard the Thunder Dragon retroactively. We draw another Solemn, so maybe that means that we should have just set the Solemn before, and maybe we would have Solemned this Mirror Force, but the Mirror Force will eat up the Lodgin. We're just going to set the Muka Muka, pass back to them. This Muka Muka has 2100 defense now with 6 cards in hand, which is very nice. They are going to flip up the Muka with the swords. Maybe we would have Solemned that, honestly, if we had the Solemn set. But maybe not. It's hard to say. They're going to Dark Hole there, and they will get a search off of that. They're going to search out the Masked Sorcerer. Very rough for us. They're going to bring out Masked Sorcerer, and they are going to attack in. We will let them take that, as this is our last Waboku, and we don't want to necessarily use it now. Yes, the card advantage is bad for us, but given we don't have too many defensive options, and we're completely out of monsters, I think we want to save the Waboku for if they make a big damage push. But it's debatable whether that was worth doing or not. We draw a Lodgin, which is very nice. We're just going to summon out the Lodgin, and we're going to activate swords just in case. I think maybe we could have saved the swords because we do have the Lodgin on field that they do need to get rid of in order to attack in. We do have the Waboku in case they can clear it and can attack in, but I guess this is the safer option here. So we're going to activate swords. They're going to set 1, switch Mask to defense, pass back to us. We draw a Fisher, so we could Fisher the Masked Sorcerer if we want to, but we don't really feel the need to. And we're just going to keep passing back here. We are going to set the Solemn as we are at 7 cards in hand again. If they've got heavy, they've got heavy. They're going to Pot of Greed, draw 2 here. And they are going to check their graveyard, set 1, set 2, pass back to us. We're feeling pretty good about that, honestly. We could Raigeki the board here and just get in for 18, get super aggressive. Honestly, that might be worth doing. But it's unclear. We can just clear the Masked Sorcerer on its own, so we might want to wait for them to commit more monsters to board next turn. And it looks like that is what we are going to do. We're playing it a bit conservatively here. We're just going to set the Giant Soldier, set a Solemn, pass back to them. If they've got a board clear, that's kind of rough, but we do have Solemn for it, and we've got another Solemn to back up the first Solemn. So not too bad. They are going to activate Heavy here, and we could Solemn this, but we've got the Waboku, and I think it's probably better just to chain the Waboku rather than just going for a Solemn and cutting our life points in half. They've also got 2 back row of their own, so if they've got another counter trap for that, we might drop down a lot here. So we're going to just Waboku this, protect ourselves for 1 turn. Turns out they didn't have a counter trap in the back row, but I don't think that was too bad. They do grab a Dark Hole, though, which is quite unfortunate for us. They will clear this board away. We don't have any monsters left, so kind of rough. We do have Change of Heart to enable us to take their monster, tribute over it for a Thunder Dragon, at least get some board presence, but it's looking kind of grim for us. We're just going to flip up the Witch, attack in directly for 11. Main phase 2, we're just going to tribute set over the Witch. They can search out a Lodgin anyways. They can get over this. So we kind of have to just go with this. Yeah, they've got 7-colored fish. That does it too. We're going to set a Solemn, pass back to them, and they're just going to bring out the 7-colored fish, unsurprisingly. We could Solemn Judgment this, but it's very likely that they have another monster that can get over Thunder Dragon on the next turn. So we can just let this go through and then Fisher it away next turn. They're just going to attack over the Thunder Dragon, pass back to us. We draw another Fisher. All this removal, but no way to capitalize on it. We will Fisher away their 7-colored fish. Pass back to them. They're going to bring out a Giant Soldier. And we could solemn that, but we really don't need to. 1300 is not too bad to take. We draw a Mass Sorcerer. And we're just going to set the Mass Sorcerer, pass back to them. This is a bit risky if they've got another 1800 beater. We could solemn it if they do have that, but I don't know. It's kind of iffy. There's definitely the world in which we just Fisher the Giant Soldier and attack in with Mass Sorcerer here, draw a card, and hope that helps us get out of the situation a bit more. But then it's left wide open if our opponent does just bring out a beater next turn, so we don't necessarily want to do that, and I don't know. It's kind of iffy. I don't know. I think that play might have been the wrong choice there. We'll have to just wait and see if it is, though. They're going to activate Swords, flip up the Mass Sorcerer, and summon out a 7-colored fish. We could have solemned this, but I really think there's no point to it. We could have solemned the Swords, but I think that puts us in a very vulnerable position. So I think we are just going to save the Solemn for later. They will be able to attack over our Mass Sorcerer, attack in for 13. Luckily, that's not too much damage, but we are in a kind of tough spot here. We're going to Dark Hole their board away. The last will is not a good draw at this point. And they're just going to bring out a Cannon Soldier. And this is very worrying. If they've got a Reborn, we just lose the game here. Because, you know, if we Solemn the Reborn, then they just attack in with Cannon Soldier, tribute it off, finish us off that way. If we Solemn the Cannon Soldier here, then they just Reborn the Cannon Soldier and win that way. So we have to save the Solemn, I think, just in case they've got the Reborn. And we'll just let that go through. If we manage to survive this turn, we do have a Fisher to clear the Cannon Soldier, but it's not looking good for us. We will take the 14. They'll set 2, pass back to us. We draw Lodge in, which is somewhat nice. We're going to Fisher away that Cannon Soldier, set the Lodge in, and pass back to them. We maybe should have summoned this, but if they've got Trap Hole, that just leaves us wide open. And we do have the Solemn here. I mean, I guess if they had Trap Hole, we could have Last Willed out something, which might have been the better choice. Yeah, I don't know. They've still got 3 Fishers in deck likely, though, so kind of iffy. I think that this is fine. If they bring out a beater, then we're kind of in a bad spot, but I think this is fine enough. They're just going to set 1, pass back to us. We draw a Muka, which could be good for later, which is very nice. Given that they didn't go on the aggressive here, though, I feel like they probably don't have an aggressive monster in hand, so there's no real reason to flip up the Lodge in. Again, if they have Trap Hole, we could just use Last Will, but that depletes our hand a bit. And given the Muka in hand, we want to kind of rebuild up our hand size. Oh, I guess we're going to Raigeki that? That's interesting. I guess because if they've got like a Raigeki of their own, or just a way to get through this Lodge we have set, then with a monster on field, it's much more likely they can kill us. I still think that's a bit of an iffy play. I don't think that this was the correct play. But we went for it anyways, and we do get punished for it because that is a Sangan. I think that we're just kind of panicking here because we're at such low life points with so few ways to get around it. And they're going to bring out a Giant Soldier, and that will be able to clear the Lodge, unfortunately. Not much we can really do about that. We've got Heavy Storm, so we could just go for the Heavy Storm here. It kind of is bad because it does get rid of our Solemn, which is the 1 point of interaction we have with them on their turn. But we are just going to do it. And if they've got Solemn, they've got Solemn. They do have the Solemn. Okay, that makes the life points a bit more even at least. We could Solemn this, but I really think there's no need to. So we're not going to do it. We're just going to let that go through. Activate a Last Will now. If they do Solemn this, then, you know, we can set the Muka Muka. But if they don't, we can summon the Muka Muka and try and attack in to their Giant Soldier of Stone, just to get a monster from deck. That will be fine by them, and we will just attack in here to the Giant Soldier. We will take a fair bit, which is kind of unfortunate, but we can get a monster from deck. Now, there are kind of 2 options we can go with here. We've only used up 1 Giant Soldier of Stone, so we still have 1 more in deck, and we could get that if we want to go a bit more defensive. Again, they haven't used up any Fishers, though, so kind of risky. If we go for Cannon Soldier, we can attack into the Giant Soldier and clear it. And they have used up a fair amount of beaters. Although they still likely have like 3 beaters in deck, so that might be a bit greedy as well. We do go for the Cannon Soldier play here, just trying to get on the aggressive. We can Solemn Judgment if they summon out a beater of their own. And if we draw another monster as well, we could potentially get in for lethal damage next turn. So they bring out a Giant Soldier. That is fine by us. We're definitely not solving that. And they activate Fissure. Given that this is very likely lethal here, we will just Solemn Judgment that. And they do have a Reborn, so that will be the end of the game, as they can just get out like a Lodgin and attack over our Cannon Soldier and attack in for game. So I think we would have lost this either way we went, because we would have had to Solemn that Fissure either way. And so if we had gotten out a Defender instead, wouldn't have mattered. But I think that this game does show off some of the flaws that Muka Muka has on its own. Muka Muka is a very powerful card in the early game and mid game, but as the game goes on and you lose more and more resources, Muka Muka becomes much, much worse, as you saw at the very end there. Now, I do think that we did play this last game somewhat poorly, but it is something to keep in mind that can come up. Also, Last Will can be a bit of a brick if you don't have any monsters, and the deck is playing a relatively low monster count. That could potentially be tinkered with in future iterations of this deck. I definitely think you can cut out some fissures potentially for some more monsters, and that might help remedy some of the deck's issues. But these issues are there in the deck as it does exist now. So that's something to keep in mind. The deck also isn't as quick as some other decks are most of the time, as you do want to sort of get into a good position to play your Mukas, or just get into a position where you can commit monsters to field, as, again, you are on a pretty low monster count. So these are some of the various issues that do plague the deck. That being said, I think the deck is still really cool on its own, even if it isn't building up to some, like, jank win condition. And I think it can still win games, even though it didn't win one here. But what do you all think? Do you all think that without some sort of other win condition, the deck just isn't worth considering? Do you all think that maybe with some changes, the deck can be vastly improved and can actually be a major meta contender? What sort of changes would you make to the deck? Please let me know down in the comments below. And until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.